Okay, so um, hi everybody, and welcome to SEAL 101, which is our introductory SEAL training. So by the time you leave today's webinar, you'll be all ready to use SEAL features and tools. So I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of your day to attend. It's really great to be able to talk to you today about one of my personal favorite things, which is interlibrary loan. So I wanted to start with some housekeeping. As you saw, the webinar will be recorded and it will be made available after this training. I'm going to email everybody with a link to the recording and also any relevant presentation materials within the next week. And then afterwards, the webinar will be going up on Southeastern's YouTube page, so you can always kind of refer back to it at any time. I did enable closed captioning for the webinar, so if you click under More on your Zoom settings, which should be along kind of the bottom of the screen, you should be able to turn those on and be able to see the captions. So I do like to start this training with a really quick PowerPoint. It's usually like 5 to 10 minutes, which kind of answers some of the basic questions new users might have about SEAL, things like who manages it, how does it work, who's involved, when should I use SEAL as opposed to using my system holds, and how you can deliver materials through SEAL. And I know that everyone is kind of coming into this training with different levels of experience. Some people maybe are looking for a SEAL refresher, while other people are maybe completely new to the system. So the PowerPoint just kind of helps make sure that we are all starting off on the same page. So then after the presentation, I'm going to jump into SEAL and do some workflows and do some, live placing of requests. So we're going to cover a lot of material today. So I'm going to kind of stop periodically throughout the training, kind of after each, section, each feature that I talk about in SEAL, and address any questions. So please feel free to put your questions into the chat as they come up. And then as I'm kind of pausing periodically, I'll take a look at those and answer any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint now. So share. Okay, great. So just in case you haven't met me before, my name is Kelsey Milner, and I am the Resource Sharing and Cataloging Librarian at Southeastern New York Library Resources Council, and I have been here now for 8 years. I just celebrated my 8-year anniversary. So this is a roadmap of what we're going to be covering today. After the PowerPoint, as I mentioned, I'll be doing live demonstrations on how to create a SEAL account, how to search the SEAL catalog, placing borrowing requests. I have a hard time saying the word request, which is tough when you work in interlibrary loan. Lending items, and then generating statistics within SEAL. And then I'm going to end by showing you some helpful resources that you can use for SEAL. We have like a manual and training videos and an FAQ. So you kind of have resources to turn to when you start using SEAL. So I also wanted to share a little bit about who Southeastern is and kind of where we fit into the library landscape. So Southeastern is a membership organization, and we serve libraries and other cultural heritage institutions all across the Mid-Hudson Valley. So we provide services to libraries of all types, public, academic, special, hospital, school, all of the libraries. And we are one of 9 similar councils within the state, each one kind of representing and serving a different region. And collectively, these councils are called the Empire State Library Network, or ESLN for short. Interlibrary loan has been a huge part of Southeastern's history since the organization was founded in, I believe, 1967. And SEAL in particular has been around now for about 26 years in a few different iterations. So it's gone through a few kind of platform and system changes, but we're still going strong. And this is Southeastern's office. We are located in Highland, right off exit 18 on the thruway. We're right next to the Lowe's on Route 299, if people know where that is. So I'm just going to go to my next slide. So I am one half of the team that manages SEAL. So kind of my duties are I provide training, like this one. I maintain all of the SEAL documentation, and I kind of help out with any day-to-day issues that might come up while using SEAL. And then we also have our systems manager, Zach Spalding, who's kind of our jack of all trades. He manages all of the technology at Southeastern. He also created the website for Seal, and he manages it and keeps it running smoothly. He also develops and implements new features for Seal as needed and helps resolve any sort of tech issues or bugs with the website. And so I've included our contact information here. And so if you ever have any Seal questions or concerns, you can always reach out by phone or by email, kind of whatever your preference happens to be. And I think I mentioned this, but I am going to share out this PowerPoint so you'll have access to all of this information. So basically, any library within the Southeastern region can participate in SEAL. And on the map that I have on the screen, the counties that are covered by Southeastern are the ones that are highlighted in the different colors. So right now we have about 177 participants from different libraries throughout our region. Our region is specifically comprised of 8 library systems, and as you start using SEAL, you'll start to see references to these different systems. So these include 5 school library systems, Dutchess, Orange Ulster, Rockland, Sullivan, and Ulster. We have our 2 public library systems, Mid-Hudson Library System, Ramapo Catskill Library System, and then we have what we refer to as the Southeastern System, which is kind of everybody else. So this includes academic libraries, hospital libraries, and special libraries as members. And then I also wanted to mention that we have one out-of-region participant in SEAL, the New York State Library. So the state library lends materials freely across the state, and this is part of their mission. So they did ask if they could participate in SEAL to make their resources available to people in our region. And so they are a great resource specifically for, academic resources and also resources that are related to New York State. So how does it work? SEAL essentially has 2 different components. So it consists of a union catalog that searches the holdings of all of our regional libraries. And this is something that is provided and maintained from a vendor called Index Data. And then as I mentioned, SEAL also has the website, which is managed at Southeastern by Zach, and that allows users to easily place and then manage any requests that they place. So our kind of tagline for how SEAL works is search and email, answer and loan. So users search the SEAL catalog, which is going to pull the live item records from libraries. And then once you locate the specific item your patron wants, you can choose a potential lender from a list of participating libraries that have the item. Once you place the request, an email will be generated to the lender asking if they can send the item. And if they can click a link directly within that email or from within their SEAL account to indicate they can send it, and then they can go ahead and mail it. And SEAL also has some other features, and these are all things that we're going to be touching on today. We have a directory of participating libraries, which has all of the contact information that you need for other SEAL users. We have a really easy to use statistics tool, so you can generate all statistics on your borrowing and lending habits and things like that. So what can you expect to get through SEAL? So SEAL is basically an option when you need something that's not available through your library or through the library system that you belong to. And so kind of the general rule of thumb is that you kind of start and work your way outwards. So you start with your own library to see if you have an item, then you go to your system, and then you would move outwards to SEAL. And people have asked me this a lot, so it's totally okay to use SEAL if an item happens to be owned by other libraries in your system, but every copy is currently checked out or otherwise unavailable. That's a totally fine circumstance in which to go to SEAL. So there's a variety of items that you can get through SEAL. Generally, you have the best luck receiving books. Books are kind of the majority of what we see shared back and forth within SEAL. You can also request physical items like CDs, DVDs, audiobooks. Some libraries will choose not to lend these because they are a little bit more delicate and potentially damaged in the mail. And you can actually make a determination in your own SEAL account of what item types you are able to lend from your library. So there are some things you can kind of expect that you won't be able to get through SEAL. This includes ebooks and other e-resources like e-audiobooks or things like that. These usually aren't allowed to be lent due to kind of vendor and license stipulations. There's also not really a good infrastructure and interlibrary loan to kind of share those resources and provide access to patrons outside of your own library system. It can also be a challenge with Seal to receive very new and very popular titles, especially things that have been published within the 6 months. A lot of times libraries will restrict these to their individual libraries, or they'll restrict them to their system kind of for a set period of time. But the policies do tend to vary a little bit from library to library. So I think it's usually worth a shot to try and place those requests, but it's good to kind of know and be able to communicate with your patron, like, this is a newer item, so it might be a little challenging to get through interlibrary loan. It might also be hard to receive things like reference materials, archival materials, special collections materials. My kind of general rule of thumb is that if it's something you would feel uncomfortable lending from your library, so something that's really rare, really expensive to replace, or really challenging to replace because it's like out of print or something like that, there's a good chance that the other library is going to feel the same way. So delivery. How do you deliver materials through Seal? I like to think of delivery as really the unsung hero of interlibrary loan. It's really kind of what makes everything possible. It's kind of, especially for a system like Seal, where we're doing a lot of physical deliveries, it's kind of what makes everything possible. So there's a few different delivery methods that you can use for Seal, and these options tend to rely both on the library that you're working at and the library that you're delivering to. So with our Mid-Hudson and our RCLS libraries, they can send materials back and forth using their system couriers. They actually meet regularly to exchange items. And RCLS and Mid-Hudson both have routing slips available, which you can use to send items through the system courier. We also have several libraries using Seal who are also participants in a program called Empire Library Delivery, or ELD for short. This is a statewide delivery service managed by the Empire State Library Network. So Seal libraries that also participate in ELD can use the service to send items to other Seal libraries. RCLS and Mid-Hudson are both members, in addition to several of our academic libraries using Seal. So a lot of our community colleges, Vassar College, SUNY New Paltz, as well as the New York State Library. And for those of you who work for Mid-Hudson or RCLS libraries, you don't have to worry about ELD and sort of like the delivery workflows for that. You can send those through your system courier as well, and the systems will take care of kind of the next step of getting it connected out to ELD and then the originating library. So any deliveries that you can't make with ELD or with library system couriers, they would need to be made with typical shipping methods like US mail or UPS. And this is often the method that you're going to be using if you're a school library trying to deliver to, a public library, an academic library, or if you're trying to deliver something to a school library. So I do have a resource available that includes a ton more information on how delivery works with Seal. So I'll be sure to show you where that is later. Okay, so that's everything I have for my sort of overview, my introduction, and I'm going to pause here and check to see if we have any questions in the chat. Okay, it's looking good. So I'm going to move on to doing some demos directly within Seal. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so we're seeing the Seal homepage. Okay, so this is the Seal homepage. The website is seal.cinelurk.org. And just as a brief side note, if you have used Seal in the past, you might notice that the site looks a little bit different. So last fall, Zach actually migrated us to a brand new web platform, WordPress. So the functionality for the site is generally the same. There's just some minor changes in appearance and a few kind of different features. So just to orient you to a few things on this homepage, so this search bar here can actually be searched by anyone who comes to this page. So this is actually available to patrons or the general public. Anyone can use the Seal catalog. You just need to have an account to actually place a request. And accounts are limited to staff at libraries. So I mentioned I was going to start from the very beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to make your own Seal account. So Seal accounts are generally linked to individual staff members at specific libraries. And so you can have as many staff members with Seal accounts as you would like. And we kind of link all these profiles together under your library. Your library is sort of like the umbrella, and then we have individual staff accounts. And then within your library's account, you'll all be able to see the same information. You'll be able to see all the borrowing and lending information for your library. Okay, so once you're ready to create an account, the first step is to click Staff Login, which is located at the top right hand of the page. This will bring you to the login page, but also bring you to the page where you can register for a new account. So just click Register here along the bottom, and then this will bring you up to the form. We recently changed our form a little bit. It's a little simplified compared to what it used to be. So next step would be to kind of work on filling this out. So that you would have to select a username. This is totally up to you. We can't change usernames, so you kind of have to pick something that you're always going to remember and always be okay with. We can look it up for you if need to, but we can't change it. A lot of people will do their first initial and last name, but again, that's totally up to you. And then you put in your work email. This invitation code, we used to have invitation codes with Seal, but with the new website, we've kind of done away with invitation codes, so you don't need to include that anymore. And then you would put in your library name, your first name, your last name, and then you would choose a home library system from this drop-down menu. And you can see all of the systems that I mentioned earlier on in the webinar, so you would just choose whichever one applies to you. Then you would include your work phone, and then we have a space for additional email. So when you place borrowing requests in Seal, you're going to receive updates to the email that you include that's linked to your account. So if you ever wanted other people to get copies of the emails that you place, you could put in an additional email here, and basically it'll CC them. So some people do that if they have, maybe 2 staff members who are in charge of Seal borrowing. So that way the other person will always get the emails that related to requests that you have placed. And then we have these 2 options for a Library of Congress, location code and OCLC symbol. If you happen to know these, you can include them, but if you don't know them, you don't have to worry about that. We can look that up for you really easily. And so then I wanted to talk a little bit about the terms of service. These are basically kind of like our sort of expectations for Seal users. So the first thing that we ask, number 1, is that you keep contact information up to date. And this is really, really important for Seal. This will basically ensure that you're receiving emails relating to interlibrary loan requests, and also that your library is getting any lending request emails. There's a lot of turnover at libraries and a lot of, sometimes email changes. So it's really helpful to keep the whole system moving smoothly if you kind of make sure that you keep those up to date. And it'll also ensure that if another library needs to reach out to you about like a request or anything like that, that you're going to, be able to be gotten in touch with. So we have 2 documents for regional interlibrary loan. We have a code and the procedures. And the ILO code is kind of like the closest thing we have to a rule book for using Seal. It provides best practices on things like, renewals, due dates, billing, how to manage lost or damaged items. I will show you later on in the training where you can find this document. And this is also what we're going to be doing a deep dive into in our training for next month, which I'm sure a lot of you are also signed up for, best practices for interlibrary loan. So we're going to cover all of those in a lot of detail in that training. So the terms also mention what I kind of consider to be sort of the golden rule of interlibrary loan, and that's what I've highlighted. So basically the rule is borrowing libraries are responsible for any materials from the minute they request it and the minute it leaves the lender shelf until the minute that it's placed back on it. And that's kind of the rule that sort of governs all interlibrary loan, not even just Seal, but just like in the broader world of ILO. And there's one last thing I wanted to mention, that we also, in part of our terms, recommend that lending libraries process requests promptly. So one thing that we do ask with Seal is that you always respond to lending requests that you receive. And it's even if you can't lend an item, that's totally fine. You might get a request for an item and go to the shelf and the item is damaged or it doesn't look like it could, survive the journey out to another library, it's totally fine to say no to the request you receive, but it is really helpful for the other library if you always respond one way or the other, because this will ensure that you don't have a request that's just kind of like hanging out in your queue that hasn't been addressed. And then from the borrower's perspective, they're not waiting to hear back. They'll know right away, okay, this library can't send this to me. I need to try a different library. Okay, so those are kind of like the terms and service. So if all of those are agreeable to you, you would click I agree, and then you would click register. And so once you click register, you'll receive an email from Southeastern, and it'll basically let you know that your account is pending approval. And then we work kind of on the back end to get everything set up, which usually just takes like a day or two. And then once your account has been approved, you'll receive a second email from Southeastern that will basically include a link for you to set your password. And then once you have all your login information, the fun really starts, because now you can get into Seal and start placing and receiving requests. All right, so I'm going to go back to this, to the login screen. I also just wanted to mention, if you ever lose your password and need to reset it, you can do that by coming to the screen and click lost your password. You put in your username or your email address, click get new password, and it'll generate a link to the email we have on file, and that'll give you a link where you can reset your password. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log in and start showing you some of the account features. So okay, so once you log into Seal, you'll be brought into your specific user profile. I'm going to start by orienting you a little bit to some of the options that are under the Edit Profiles option. So all of your account options will come in over on the left-hand side, and it'll kind of show you some different things that you can do with your Seal account. So your user profile is basically where you can update some of the things that are related to your specific Seal account. So you can change the email. If you ever get a new email, you need to change your email, you can really easily update that. This is also where you can generate a new password for yourself if you would like to change it. You can also modify your work phone. And this is also another place where you can add in that additional email that I talked about before. Like if you want somebody to be CC'd on the borrowing request you place, this is where you can put those emails in. And you can put in multiple emails. You just separate them with a semicolon, and it'll send them out to all those emails. So if you do make any changes to your user profile, you just want to make sure that you click Save Profile before you start, before you navigate away from that. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is your library profile. So your user profile is something that only you'll see, but the library profile is something that every staff member at your library who has a Seal account can see. And so everyone can edit this and make changes as needed. So this is overall the library profile is where you can edit your library's contact information and where you can change some of your lending preferences. The first section, Library Details, has all of your library's contact information. And this contact information is what we use to populate your library's directory entry. So you do want to make sure that you kind of keep this up to date. So this email right here is where emails relating to Seal lending requests will be sent. So when someone places an ILO request to your library, this is where that message and all the subsequent updates will go. So some people have different ways for managing this. So you can put in multiple emails, separate them with a semicolon, or you can do a shared lending email. And that's kind of what we've done at Southeastern with this ILO email. It's like an email that everything is forwarded to multiple people who are all doing ILO work at Southeastern. So you can kind of do whatever the preference is for your particular library. And then, so we have suspension. So it's really, really easy in Seal to turn yourself off as a lender. So if you ever are getting too many requests, or there's a period of time where you can't address requests, so this could be like, maybe staff shortages, limited hours due to like a library move or limited hours over the summer, staff vacations, anything like that, you can really easily turn yourself off as a lender in Seal. And this will have benefits for both you and the other library because you're not going to be getting a lot of requests that you can't address. It'll just basically remove you totally as an option. And then on the borrowing side, our borrowing libraries won't be placing requests to a library that can't address the request. So if you ever need to turn yourself off as a lender, you change under suspend your library's lending status, you change this to yes, and then you put in an end date. If you don't include an end date, the system will default to 7 days, and after 7 days, you'll become active again. So you can just put in a suspension end date, and you can do it kind of as far out as you would like. So you just click a date, and then this right here will kind of tell you your current status for your library. And so to kind of save this change, you scroll down to the bottom and click submit, and then you'll be turned off as a lender. The profile is also where you can manage the delivery options available to your library. So these options are actually used to create delivery suggestions for lending requests. So once we get into placing a sample request, you'll see the suggestions that come up. So for public libraries, it's important to keep ELD and your public library system courier as options to ensure that the suggestions are accurate. But you can kind of make these determinations for yourself of like whether or not you can mail something out through US mail or whether you can use couriers. So this will be helpful for libraries when they go to lend materials. They also have items willing to loan. This is where you can indicate the types of materials that your library is able to lend to other libraries. So if you put no for any type of material, so like we have no clicked for AV materials, so that means that any like DVDs, CDs, audiobooks, things like that, we won't get any requests for those because we've indicated that we can't lend them. So this, again, can save you some time getting requests for things that you can't lend or don't feel comfortable lending, and it saves the borrowing library some time because they're not placing requests to a library who can't lend something. So again, you make any changes, just click submit to save them. And what I like about this is that you can actually see the last time your profile was modified, and you can see which user modified it. So this can be helpful if you, are trying to check to see when the last time like the contact information was updated or anything like that. You can kind of see when it was last changed. So that's the library profile. And then we also have this view library account. So as I mentioned, you can have multiple staff members at your library with their own Seal accounts. And this is where you can see who at your library has staff accounts. And it'll just list the person and their username, their email, last login, and things like that. And so this is how you can kind of keep track of who at your library has Seal accounts. And if you ever have somebody who leaves a position, you can let us know and we can delete them. And this can also be a good way if you ever need to know who to make a new account for. You can kind of see if they already have one. And things like that. So it's helpful for a little bit of maintenance. And we have a million accounts because we have a lot of training accounts and things like that. But you would probably only have like a few listed. All right, so I'm just going to move quickly to request status. So your account is also where you can see a list of basically all the interlibrary loan requests that you've placed to other libraries, and then you can see all the ones that you have received from other libraries. So if we were to click on borrowing requests, it'll take you to essentially a chronological listing of all the requests that your library has placed. So every request brings in a variety of information. So every request is assigned an ILL number, and this is the same for both parties in the transaction, so you can communicate using this number, and it should be the same for both of you. Requests will also bring in things like bibliographic information, the type of the item, the lending library, email for the lender. It also includes due date, and we have this timestamp field. So this date right here is the date that the request was placed, and then you can see the date of the most recent action. So the most recent thing that happened with this request was that the item was received, and it was received today. So on the far right-hand side, you can see access. You can access different status updates for your request. So I put in a few fake requests, so you can kind of get a sense of what status update options are available through an ILO transaction. So borrowers can cancel requests. They can receive items once they come into their library. They can request renewals for materials right through Seal, and they can also return items using this action bar. And I'll show you how to use these as we walk through some fake requests. We also have a feature where you can do bulk updates to statuses. So this can be helpful if you have, maybe you have like 3 items that all need to be checked in. You can click into each request, clicking into the little square on the far left-hand side, and then you go to under perform bulk action, you select the action, and then you would click submit. And then that'll change all of the requests simultaneously. So it can be something that just saves you a lot of time if you're processing a lot of requests. We generally do encourage you to update your Seal item request. It's really helpful for both of the libraries in the transaction. There was a time when we didn't have status updates in Seal, and so when a lender would send an item, there's not an easy way to know if the item actually, showed up or when it's on its way back. So the status updates give you a way to kind of track the item throughout the ILO process. And this can be helpful too if you ever, there is an aspect of interlibrary loan that's a little bit like detective work sometimes, where sometimes if an item gets lost, or you might have to do a little bit of backtracking and kind of see, when was it last, when was it received, when was it sent out. And so having that information is really helpful for both parties. So we have some tools that can also help you filter and search for requests in your borrowing request history. So in the top of the screen, you can sort your requests by kind of like their current status. And our default is to hide canceled or expired requests. So if you ever need to see a canceled request, you could click into this update results, and then it'll show you your canceled ones. I don't know if I have any. Oh yeah, there I do. I have one. It'll show you those requests that were previously hidden. And so if you ever want to undo that kind of filter, you click out of it, update, and it'll kind of go back to the default, which is to hide that. You can also search by ILL number. So if you need to search for a specific transaction, you can do that. And then you can also search by the lender name to get at specific requests. So the process is similar if you would like to see a request history of the items that you have lent to other libraries. You would just select lending requests, and it'll open up. The list is pretty similar, kind of brings in similar information, but you'll see that my status update options are a little different here. So as a lender, you can fill or not fill Seal request from this screen. You can also edit fill status. So this is kind of a newer update that we've recently done. So if you have filled a request, but say you went to get the item off the shelf and you've already said you could lend it and the item is actually like damaged, or maybe it's not there, you can edit the fill status and actually kind of indicate that you couldn't actually lend it. So this is only meant to be used in sort of extreme circumstances where you said you could lend something, but it turns out that it's actually not available. You can edit that and kind of let the lender or the borrower know we can't actually send that. And you can also approve renewals, deny renewals, and you can check items back in. We do have a few bulk status updates for lenders. It's a little different because with lending, a lot of times you have to include specific dates. So you need to include like a specific due date. So you can't really do a lot of bulk updates, but we do have, you can bulk not fill requests. So if you get a bunch of requests you can't fill, you could bulk not fill them, or so this seems like an awkward sentence, or you can bulk check items back in. So I'm going to go over the other 2 sections in the account a little bit later in the training. We have statistics and we have some quick links, but I'm going to switch gears for now and go into searching. But I just wanted to pause really quickly to check if there are any questions. Look in the chat. All right, I don't see any questions. Okay, so I'm going to move on to searching. Okay, so I've gone back to kind of the home screen so we can get a bigger view of the search bar. So our 3rd webinar in this series is going to be doing a pretty big deep dive into the ins and outs of the Seal catalog. So today is really just going to be kind of a lighter introduction to get you going with the catalog. So just some general kind of facts about how the catalog works. It searches around 400 libraries across the Southeastern region, and our catalog is kind of multi-purpose. It serves two different purposes. It's meant to be a general regional catalog for the area, kind of like the way that WorldCat functions, but it's also the interlibrary loan catalog specifically for SEAL. So this is why you might at times see some libraries in the catalog that aren't participating in ILL. Since our catalog does serve this dual purpose, we have some search categories, and you can see this under the select category option. This makes it easier to get specifically to materials that can be shared through ILO. So the default search for SEAL is to select all lenders. So this is something you want to stick with to make sure that you're only seeing results from libraries that participate in ILL. But you can also narrow this down by specific library types. So if you only want to maybe request something from an academic library, you want to get something from the state library, you can also narrow down to just that specific group of lenders. So I'm going to stick with lenders for now. So the catalog works through a protocol called Z39.50. And so SEAL itself as a catalog doesn't actually have holdings. It's more like a search, a search engine. So basically when you enter a search string, the catalog performs a live search of other libraries' catalogs to pull in matching records based on your search string. And then the system will try and automatically overlay all of the matching records that it comes in, allowing you to basically see a list of all the libraries that report owning it. And you can use title, author, ISBN, or keywords in SEAL. In the SEAL search, you can do simple queries, and then you can do more complex ones using Boolean operators. For the sake of time, we're just going to focus on simple searches and then how to use the advanced search tool. Because SEAL searches such a large volume of records, the catalog tends to work best with really, really specific searches. ISBNs can be a really quick way to locate an item if you happen to have it. If your item has a unique title or it has a title with a lengthy subtitle, you can usually get away with just doing a basic, simple title search. So I'm going to show this with my favorite test search, which is Drive, the surprising truth about, oops, I hit the back button on accident. Drive, I hope I have a hard time typing when I know people are watching me. All right, motivates us. All right, it was tough, but I did it. So when you do the SEAL search, the catalog is basically looking at, it's looking at record titles, it's looking at subject headings, and it's looking at no fields, all of these different things to kind of come up with a potential match. So because my title was really lengthy and pretty unique, the book that I'm searching at was one of my, my main hits. You can see that the catalog will, see if I can make this a little bigger. So the catalog will separate things out by item types. You can see that with the different icons. And if you hover over the icons, you can see a list of the libraries that report owning it. You might at times see the same title separated out onto different records. You can see that with this one. We have several libraries that are on different titles. This is just because, for whatever reason, in the moment that the catalog was compiling the list, it couldn't verify that it was the same item. And this is usually due to kind of small variances in cataloging and things like that. So this example is pretty easy and straightforward, but sometimes the catalog can be a little more challenging because it is so massive and it's searching so many libraries. If you have a title that is not unique enough, just too broad, you can get way too many hits. You can get like a million hits. One of my favorite examples to demonstrate this is from Allie Smith, who wrote a series of books with titles that are based on different seasons. So if we were to try a seasonally appropriate one, I'm going to try summer. So we're going to get way too many hits back. The catalog is still kind of chugging along, and we have 1,300, 1,500 hits back. And this is because it's just bringing in way too many hits, not only on the title summer, but also within summaries and other parts of the MARC records. So one really quick way to narrow down our results is to try advanced search, which you can locate here. It's also under the search bar at the main SEAL homepage. So you can click advanced search. And advanced search is great because it'll allow you to generate a really specific request utilizing multiple terms at once. So you can include keywords like publication date, you could title, author, subject, ISBN. You can get really specific and granular with your request. So I'm going to try doing a simple title and author search. So I'm going to do Smith Alley, and you can see that as you type in, it'll show you what your query is going to be at the bottom of the page. And you can do these kinds of queries without going to advanced search. And this is what we're going to touch on in the third webinar a little bit more. Sometimes I do find it easier just to go to advanced search to get kind of like all the formatting correct with that. So I'm going to go ahead and search. So you can see this search was a lot more effective than our initial search. You know, we've gotten down to just the actual book that we're looking for. So now I'd like to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about navigating the SEAL search results page. So at the top of the page, we have options for help. We have the advanced search, which I just showed you, and we have search history. So clicking help will bring you to a page that has a little bit of information on searching in SEAL and how to construct search queries and things like that. If you click on search history, you'll see a list of all the previous searches that you have tried. And so if you ever want to move back to a previous search, you can click on it and it'll redo your old search. So I'm going to go back to my initial Drive search. There's also options to sort materials by relevance. Relevance is the default, but you can also sort by date and title. You can also change the amount of results that you get on a single page if you want to get more than the default. On the left-hand side, there are facets that you can use to further narrow down your search results. So you can narrow down by library category. So you only wanted to get this book from an academic library, you can narrow it down that way. You can narrow down by format, and you can narrow it down by a specific library system or library that's listed here. We also have, you can narrow down by subject or author, and the bigger the word is, the more libraries that report owning that particular subject or author. So I'm going to show you how to do this really quick. So if you were to narrow down by facets, say you wanted a CD of this, you click into CD recording and it'll kind of narrow down to just that item. And if you ever want to move back and undo your facet, you could click all and it'll take you back to your initial search before you narrow down by facet. And you can actually narrow down by multiple facets. If you want to get really, really granular with something, you can kind of keep narrowing down by facets. So there are basically two options for initiating an interlibrary loan request from the catalog. So you can see we have the request button that's right here. You can also click into the title for an item. If you click into the title, you're going to see some bibliographic information on the book, and you'll see a list of the sources that you can choose from. I do want to note that the information that's brought into this, into the title screen, it varies a little bit based on the particular library catalog a system is using. Some of the catalogs are linked. Some of the catalogs aren't able to be linked anymore because there have been a lot of issues in the last year with bot scraping for library catalogs, and some libraries have had to implement some like security measures that make it no longer possible to link from this page. So it's a little different depending on different library systems. You can kind of see the list of libraries that report owning it. So you can also initiate a request from right here. So one thing that I really want to know about this screen that I know can sometimes be a source of potentially confusion or frustration. So when you click request, we apply additional filters and we filter out libraries that have turned themselves off as lenders. We filter out libraries that have said, I can't lend this particular item type. So this list that you see here is not necessarily a comprehensive list of the people that can actually lend the item, because we're going to apply additional filters to filter out those libraries who have said that for whatever reason they can't lend this item. So once you click request, that's when you can kind of start initiating the ILO request. And so I just wanted to pause again just to see if there were any questions before we move on to placing a seal request. And I'm going to take a sip of water really quickly, but I am going to mute myself so you don't have to hear it. Okay, so just checking the chat. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about placing a request in Seal. So I'm going to do a test request for the book Drive, and you might notice in my borrowing and lending request histories, this is the only book that I place requests for. We've been using it as our test book for the last 8 years, and I'm kind of a creature of habit. So I've determined that I want to request this book, so I would click request. And basically at this point, if you're not logged into your Seal account, you'll get a prompt to log into your account. And so if you have any patrons or community members who are using the catalog, that's the point where they would, hit, a login. But they can browse the catalog other than that. So when your the request screen will show up with your requester details for your account. So I usually just, kind of recommend taking just a quick look just to make sure everything that we have for you looks all up to date and accurate. And then you can start filling in this form. So a lot of these fields are totally optional. This is an optional field, need by date. So if you have a patron who says, I need to have this in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that can be a helpful information to share with the lending library, because they can know right away, like, okay, I can't process that request this quickly. It's not possible. They'll kind of know to say no. It is really hard with interlibrary loan to predict how long an item is going to take to show up, especially with delivery. It's not always consistent. So that's why need by dates generally can be a little tricky. And one thing that's important to communicate with patrons who are potentially placing ILO requests outside of their system is that it is going to be slower than system holds. That's just kind of how it is. ILL is not a quick process. So that's kind of an important thing to make sure you communicate. But if you do have a need by date and it's like kind of a hard need by date, you can include that in there, and that'll be good information for the lender. There's also this optional notes field. So one of the things that I emphasize a lot with using Seal is the importance of communication, making sure that you communicate with the other library in the transaction as needed, and kind of don't be afraid to reach out to them if you have questions or concerns or anything comes up. That's kind of what makes, we have the directory, which has all of the information that you would need to get in touch with those libraries. But this is also an opportunity to communicate with the lender. So if there's anything about your request that you feel would maybe be confusing, maybe there's something about it that's a little unique, you can put it in the notes field. So one example that I see sometimes is people request graphic novels, and depending on the way that these are cataloged, sometimes it's not always clear which number is being requested. So that can be something to put into a notes field to just provide clarifying information on your request. But again, the note is totally optional. And we also have this field, patron name or barcode. This is something that's only going to be visible to the borrowing library. The lending library is not going to see the patron information. This field is also totally optional. We at Southeastern, we don't need the patron information. This is really for just your library for the benefit of matching a SEER request to the patron who requested it. So it's something that could, in theory, help you out, kind of make that match. But we don't necessarily need this information. So you kind of want to make sure that you follow any patron privacy rules that you might have in place at your organization. Like I know some school libraries, they're not allowed to use names. They can only use, barcodes or other non-identifying information. So just be sure to follow whatever policies you might have for patron privacy. Since we're requesting a print book, I'm going to choose no for, is this a request for an article? If you were wanting to request an article, you could click yes, and then all of the citation fields will open up and display. Or click no. So then you'll see the bibliographic information. And then you see this is a request for a single copy or multiple copies. So multiple copy is kind of a newer feature in Seal. It basically allows you to send the same request simultaneously to multiple libraries. So if you select into it and you click, you can click into multiple libraries at once. Um, these should only be limited to things like book clubs or classroom sets. Don't try to use it to get a copy of a book faster, because if you do that, you might end up with like 5 copies of the same book. It could be disastrous. And if you do a multiple request, we do have a couple of recommendations for doing this. So you want to try and spread out the request among different systems when that is possible to do so, because that'll ensure that the same book isn't checked out of every library within a system. And I also recommend putting it into a notes field that this is a request for, like a book club or a classroom set, just because there are some libraries who kind of want to know that, and they might have like policies around whether or not they lend items for those particular things. So just kind of like the more information that you can provide up front is usually good. So I'm going to do single copy because I'm just requesting to myself, and I'm all the way down here. So I'm going to place a request to myself, but you would kind of, so the system doesn't choose a lender automatically. This is something that you kind of have to make a determination on. And as you start using Seal, you might start to kind of form relationships with other libraries, like have good experiences with them, and you might start to, recognize some of these library names. But you can kind of go through the list and you pick a library to choose from, basically. And it'll list the library system, and it should bring in, the availability for the item. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and submit this request to myself. So once you place a request, you'll get this request summary. Another thing that will happen is that 2 emails will be sent out simultaneously. So you'll get an email that basically confirms that your request was placed, and then the lender will get an email asking if they can lend it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that email looks like. So hopefully you guys are able to see this. Oh, yeah, okay. So it just includes kind of the bibliographic information on the item that was requested, and then you also have a link to cancel it right within the email. If you do ever submit a request that, maybe the patron changes their mind about wanting it, or something else happens, maybe you get it from somebody else, you can cancel it really easily. So you can click this link, and you can also do so from within your account. So I'm going to kind of go through and show you some of the request management features for borrowing requests. So we're going to go back into our account. And one thing I forgot to show you is that we also have these library quick links up here. This is something that's new to the updated Seal website. So you can always use these to navigate to different parts of your account. Kind of like no matter where you are, you can always use these to kind of get to different places of the website. And we also have it on the left-hand side. So I'm going to go into borrowing requests, and that request that I just placed will be first, because they all come in chronologically. And so you can also cancel a request right here. But that email, if you click the link in the email, it'll take you to the same place. So at this point, in our kind of scenario, we've placed a request to the other library, and we're basically waiting to hear back from them. And the lender is going to have like 5 business days to respond, and then after 3 days, they'll be sent a reminder email, kind of reminding them, like, oh, you have this outstanding lending request. If the library doesn't respond, the request will expire, and you'll get an email letting you know that the request expired, and then you'll have to resubmit it to a different library. So let's say with our scenario that the library was ultimately able to lend the item. So if they say yes, you're going to receive a confirmation email that lets you know that it was able to be lent, and it'll provide the shipping method and the contact information of the lending library. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what an example of that email looks like. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see this a little better. So they'll basically just say that the request was filled, and it'll tell you what method it's being shipped by, if the lending library has responded with any notes, and I'll show you that when we go into the lender side of things. And then it'll give you the email to reach out to for future communications. So this is the email for the lending library, and this is the email that's provided within their library profile. So then at this point, you've got a confirmation email. The lender can send it. You basically have to just wait till the item shows up. This can usually take a couple of weeks, sometimes quicker, sometimes longer. As I mentioned before, ILLs is not known as being a fast process. But once it does arrive, you can check it out to your patron using your ILS if you want to keep track of the book as you normally would. So the method that you use to check out the item in your library's ILS, it might depend on your particular library or library systems workflows. The most common method that I've seen for doing this is to create this basically a temporary bibliographic record for the item and then check it out to the item or check it out to the patron. But your specific library system, so if you're part of one of the public library systems, they should be able to give you some more guidance on how to use your catalog to track interlibrary loan materials. But you can also use SEAL as a way to communicate with the lender in the transaction. So I'm going to show you how to receive an item. So this is sort of like cooking shows where they make the meal and then they're like, oh, I actually have one that's already finished. So I have some ILO requests that are already in process. So I can show you how to update these. So let's say we have gotten our item back or we've gotten our item from the lender. We can click receive to let the lender know. You just click received and it'll update the request. You can go back to the request history. So once you've received an item, 2 new request statuses will appear: request a renewal or return item. So if your patron ever needs more time with an item, you can request a renewal using this option. So you can put in a reason. So like maybe your patron needs more time. You can indicate, how much more time they need or anything like that. Basically, this will generate an email to the lender asking them if you can have a renewal for the item. And if they agree to the renewal, you'll get an email with the updated due date. And if they can't supply the renewal, you'll get an email that says the renewal was denied. So once you're ready to send the item back to the lender, you can click Return Item, and a screen will appear with a drop-down menu for delivery methods. And so the way the item was originally sent to you is often a good indicator of how you can return it. So if it came through your system courier, that means you can probably use your system courier to send it back. I'll go into delivery a little more when we talk about the lending side of things, but you choose the method and then you can put in return notes. So a lot of people use the return notes to put in the date it was mailed back. So I'm just going to put in a fake note here. And again, like I mentioned, if you ever have to do any ILO detective work, this can be so helpful to have this information because you'll be able to track it back to when it left the borrowing library. Okay, so once that's submitted, basically the lender will be able to see that the item was returned. And basically once the item gets back to the lender and they check it in, then your ILO transaction is complete. And so this kind of completes our section on managing borrowing requests. So I'm just going to pause. I did see something coming to the chat. Who pays for the mailing? That's a good question. So generally with mailing, the way that I've always seen it work with ILO, like kind of beyond regional, is that the lender pays to mail it and then the borrower pays to mail it back. And that's typically how it works in terms of like using US Mail or UPS or FedEx or things like that. And with SEAL, we don't have a specific vendor that you have to use because I know some libraries might already have relationships with, you might have like a UPS account or maybe you tend to use US Mail. You can kind of use whatever method works for your library, and methods kind of have like different pluses and minuses. Like US Mail tends to be really cheap because you can use library mail rate, which is like a special rate for specifically for libraries to use to send materials to each other. But library mail rate can take a little longer as it's kind of routed through various locations. And then, UPS is something that's like a little more expensive, but it does have tracking. It tends to be a little quicker. So there's kind of like pluses and minuses. And I'm always happy to answer questions about delivery. If you ever have questions about what method you should be using, like, is this something I can use my courier for? Is this something I would need to mail? I'm always happy to provide guidance on that. Are there any other questions before I move into kind of the lending side? Okay, so I'm going to kind of change gears now, and now we're going to pretend as if we were a lender, and we received a lending request for Drive. So basically, once the request is placed, you're going to receive an email asking if you can lend this item. And I'm going to show you a copy of what that email looks like. Lending request. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little better. So basically, it'll say, new request has been placed to your library, and it'll give you the information on who requested it and their contact information. And then you'll see all of the data about the requested item. So you'll see the ILL, can't talk, the ILL number that's going to be the same for both libraries. And then you'll see all of the publication information. And you should also see a call number so you can take it off the shelf. And if the borrowing library has left you any notes, like if there was anything unique about the request, you'll see that under request note. So then you'll see these links at the bottom that basically say, will you fill this request? Yes or no. So you can click into these and it'll take you back into the SEAL website. And if you're logged in, it'll take you into your account and you can basically address the request right there. But I'm also going to show you where you can find that. So to go to lending request, and then we'll again see it as the first request because it's coming in chronologically. So your first step as a lender is to basically determine if this is an item that you can loan. My recommendation is always to check the shelf and have the item in your hand before you click yes, because sometimes a book might be listed as available on your shelf, and then you go to take it off the shelf and it's not there. So this can be a good way of making sure you're not filling a request that you actually have to kind of go back and change. As we mentioned, we do have the edit fill status that you can use to change if that situation ever comes up. So you basically have two options. You can click yes, will fill, no, can't fill. And so if you determine that you can't lend the indicated item, select no, can't fill. So this will bring you to a screen where you basically can include a reason why you couldn't lend it. And this can be really helpful to the borrowing library as they kind of continue to try and find a lender. So for example, if you indicate it can't be loaned because it's currently checked out, that'll let them know that maybe you have the item and they can try and request it at a later date. So it is helpful to include that information when you decline a request. However, if you determine that you can lend it, you can click yes, will fill. And the first thing you'll see are those delivery recommendations that I mentioned. And these recommendations are generated based off the delivery options that are within your library profile. And a recommendation will only appear if both you and the borrower have access to the same resource. So for this example, it's okay for me to send it via US mail. It's okay to send it through FedEx or UPS. Those are the resources that I specifically have access to. So delivery, as I mentioned, is a tricky thing. So I wanted to show you where you can find some of the additional information that we have when it comes to delivery. So we have a LibGuide for SEAL. So I think I have this open. This kind of includes a lot of helpful resources on using SEAL. And then we have this delivery page right here. So this kind of breaks down more about the different delivery methods. So I have information on the couriers, ELD, and FedEx, and US mail and things like that. So for our public library members, we have information on determining the delivery method that you should use, because the challenge is that you can use your courier for a lot of SEAL deliveries, but not all. So this will kind of break down how you determine whether or not you can use your courier. So it has like instructions for doing so. We also have a section on ELD, so you can see the current members who participate in both C and ELD. And I do keep this up to date and just kind of check to make sure that it's accurate. And there's like a few links for ELD resources. And then we have this section, which is more about like those delivery vendors that I mentioned. If you have to deliver to like a school or a special library or someone who doesn't participate in a courier, this has some information on using those services. So this is kind of where you can go for some help with delivery. And in terms of if you are part of one of the public library systems, your system is also going to be a great resource for asking about delivery using your courier. So they'll give you information on like delivery slips and best practices and all of those sorts of things. And if you're not ever sure who to contact about a specific issue, like is this something I should reach out to my public library system about? Is this something I should reach out to Southeastern about? If you reach out to me, I'll kind of put you in touch with who you need to talk to. I always like refer to it as being sort of an old-timey telephone operator. They kind of like had the little thing where they would like connect you to, who you wanted to talk to. So I'm more than happy to do that. Okay, so that's kind of where you can get some help with in terms of figuring out delivery. So this is the rest of the screen. So basically you can put in information. This is any notes that you want to give to the borrowing library. So a lot of people will use this to say when they mailed it out. And again, that can be helpful information to have. So I'm going to say sent via US mail 7/22. And then you can indicate a due date. So due dates are up to the lender. We don't have a set due date in Seal. This is kind of up to the discretion of the lender. And we'll talk about more about due dates in our next training, the one that's in August. It is helpful to keep in mind when you are trying to figure out a due date that it could take potentially up to 2 weeks for the item to actually get to the borrower. So you want to make sure that you include enough time so that because the borrowing library is still going to have to reach out to their patron, wait for their patron to come in, and then so it could take up to a few weeks before their patron even has like their hands on the book or whatever item you happen to send. So it's good to kind of keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out a good due date. So I'm going to do one. I lost count of how many weeks. I meant to do 6 weeks, but that might not be quite right. But then you click in the due date and then you choose the shipping method. And we have a drop-down menu, and this goes over all of those options that I mentioned previously. So you click submit. And again, the borrowing library is going to get that email confirming that you are able to send it. All right, go back to lender history. So again, your library or your library system might have a specific workflow for checking materials out to a borrowing library. The most common method that I've seen is that the borrowing library is added as an ILO patron, and the book is essentially checked out to the library. Again, you can talk to your, the catalog administrators at your specific public library systems or your whatever type of system you are for more information on kind of how to use your catalog in that way. And also I can kind of put you in touch with the right person if you ever have a question about that. But again, I'm going to go over some of the status updates for materials in Seal. So kind of once you have determined you can lend the item, you've checked it out and mailed it to the borrowing library. Now you have some updates that you can do on your side of things. So after a library receives an item, you can edit the due date. I don't think I have an example of that up here. This can be helpful if you ever need to change a due date for any reason. You can also use Seal to fill renewal requests. So if a borrowing library requests a renewal, you'll basically receive an email asking if you are willing to extend the due date. So this is what that renewal request will look like. It'll basically have the ILO number for the item, and it'll mention that a due date, a renewal has been requested, and it'll include the borrower's notes on the request. And so this is something that you would need to respond to within your Seal account. And so the approve renewal and deny renewal options will show up automatically once that borrowing library has placed that request. So if you can't lend it, you click deny renewal, and it'll deny it. But if you can click approve renewal, and then you can key in a new due date for the item. And you can also include any notes if you have anything. That's totally optional. You don't have to include that. And then you can also check an item back in. So, oops. But once an item has kind of come back to your library, you can click check item back in, and it'll say, do you wish to mark the item as returned? If you do, you click yes and submit it. So then in this case, you would check the item back in and kind of return it back to your shelf. So those are kind of some of the main status updates that we have for lending. So I'm just going to pause briefly before we go into a few last things to talk about the Seal directory and then generating statistics. But we're kind of getting close to the end, so we might end a little before 2:30. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. And again, if you have any questions as you start to use Seal, you can always give me a call or send me an email, and I'm happy to help. Okay, so the Seal ILL directory, I want to show you that really quickly. It's a really helpful tool once you start using ILL. It's where you can look up the contact information for other libraries in the transaction. And there's two ways to get to it. You can get to it from within your account under these quick links, or you can get to it up here. I'm going to go ahead. So basically, the directory lists all of the participating Seal libraries in alphabetical order. So to find a specific location, you can browse this way and kind of just scroll through, or you can search by library name, or you can narrow down by library system. So if you want to narrow down by system, you just choose the system, click submit, and it'll show you the libraries that are specifically under that system. I'm going to search for Southeastern. So when you search for a specific name, then just that entry will come up. And so it'll include all of their contact information. It'll say whether or not they're currently accepting requests. So that can be helpful if you're curious whether a library is currently lending. You'll click show loaning options, and this will say, what materials that particular library is able to send through ILO. So again, this is a really helpful resource for ILO for communicating with the other library. And so I also wanted to show you statistics. So I'm going to go. We have a really easy to use statistics tool for Seal. It allows you to kind of easily generate data on materials that you've borrowed, materials that you lent. So if you want to generate statistics on requests that you have placed to other libraries, you can click borrowing statistics. Oh, I was already in it. This is live TV. Okay, so I'm going to go from the beginning of the year till today's date. You put in a start date and an end date and click submit, and it'll start to generate that data for you. So it'll provide you basically with raw numbers on how many requests that you have placed to other libraries, how many have been filled, how many weren't filled, how many expired, were canceled. And it'll also break down those requests further by library system. I only do like fake training requests. So you might see a bunch of different other systems. You might see like other public library systems or school library systems or academic libraries. But I have only placed requests to myself. So it also breaks down requests by item type. So this can be really helpful if you ever want to see like kind of what your patterns are for your library. This can be helpful if you ever have to do reports to like your library board, to your library system, and you're reporting to the state. You can kind of keep track of your borrowing habits. And then it's pretty much the same for lending. Just click into, oh, I clicked lending requests. I do that all the time. Lending statistics is what I meant to click. So again, you just put in a date range, 2026, click submit, and it'll show up your raw data for your lending requests. So this is what you have sent out to other libraries. So how many you've received, how many you filled of those, how many weren't filled, and then again, it breaks it down by specific library types. So I also wanted to show you, we have these quick links options. This is a way to get to some resources. So this will get you to that LibGuide that I mentioned, the Seal LibGuide. We also have this feedback support request quick link. So this is basically a place where you can submit any issues that you run into with the Seal website. So it's you can also always call and email me, but this is just a way where it's like really easy. You're already in Seal. You can just click on this, and it'll basically generate almost like a support ticket, and it'll come right to like me and Zach, and we'll be able to see your issues. So you just, this is pretty small. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So you can put in your name, your contact information, the description of your problem. You can also use this to like make suggestions about Seal, any sort of Seal related support that you need, you can put it in this request form. And include the ILO number. If your issue is related to a specific request, this is really helpful for us to be able to look up the request and do a little bit of digging and kind of see what the issue is. But yeah, this is a way to easily kind of indicate that there is an issue. And then the very last thing I wanted to show you was just a little bit more about the Seal LibGuide before we kind of end. So I just want to show you a little bit more about these resources that I mentioned that can help you kind of with Seal moving forward. So I also have a Seal manual, and this manual kind of breaks down all of the different workflows in Seal. And it's the table of contents is linked, so you can kind of find like a specific thing and it'll take you right to that section. And then there's you can go back to the table of contents, so you can kind of really easily navigate and try and find information on whatever part of Seal you have a question about. We also have some short tutorial videos. This is one place that once I get the recording of this webinar up, this will be linked right here under training videos. It'll probably replace this one, which is from 2024. We have FAQs. I do a Seal newsletter, which includes like kind of updates on Seal and like helpful hints. And I also include some general interlibrary loan news there. And then just wanted to end with showing you additional tools. So this is where you can find that ILO code and that ILO procedures that I mentioned at the beginning of the training. So if you click this, it'll take you to the ILO code. And you can see it's kind of a lengthy document. It basically breaks down all of the responsibilities for borrowers. They call it the requesting library. So that's borrowing libraries, and then it also breaks down responsibilities for the lending library. And this is what we're going to be focusing on next month, but I swear we won't just, stay in the document and then like read through the whole document. That would be a really tough training. I kind of break down into specific topics like due dates, renewals, things like that. Yeah, so that's kind of where you can find that if you need that as a resource as you're starting to use Seal. So that's kind of everything that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and just check and see if there's any last questions about Seal or anything that we've talked about today. And again, if you have questions after the fact, you can always, reach out to me, get in touch, and I'm happy to help. So I did just want to thank everyone for being here today. It was really great to be able to talk about Seal and interlibrary loan. And I also wanted to thank people for being willing to share their resources. Like, this might be corny, but it's so true that it's kind of your hard work and your generosity that makes Seal possible. Because as a borrower, you're going the extra mile for your patron to get something, beyond your library system. And from the lending side, you're lending something to a patron that's, outside of your library. And I think that's really cool. So, I love interlibrary loan, and it was, great to be able to kind of walk you through Seal. So I think that's everything I have. So I'll work on getting the recording for today uploaded, and I'll send that out to everybody along with the PowerPoint that I shared at the beginning. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Oh, thanks. Thank you. All right, everyone, have a good day.